Chapter 3. The Gig. Actually, just simply Gig. Downtown LA, high noon. Jezebel drives her old but shiny silver 96 Camaro down the street as her palms feel to melt against the black skin roulette in her hands. It's a hot one in a city where heat exudes from more places and objects than just the sun. It's a hot midday start for Jessie, having woken up just a few hours ago, and she has a photo shoot to attend to. Great, where are those fumes coming from? Wonders Jezebel. Her Camaro is dispelling white smoke from the passenger side of her hood, from between the cracks. Great, just great, she thinks. As mechanically inclined to car repair as she is, not much. Here's an issue she's been putting off longer than she should have. Her V6 Camaro has a profusive oil leak. Just a month ago, Jezebel had a male buddy of hers take a look under her Camaro's hood, and had found a leaky valve gasket, which needed to be replaced. Jezebel had just had an oil change the month prior, and now here was her car almost bone dry, making clanking noises coming from her unlubricated engine block pistons. How hard is it to change the valve gasket? Jezebel had asked this buddy. You know anything about car repair? The buddy had questionably asked. I know a thing or two. Fancy Jessie. But this buddy of hers then began telling her everything she needed to know. Okay, well, first off, with this car, you have to start off by removing the alternator since it's in the way, then... But that was already enough information for her to know she was mechanically out of her league. And that buddy of hers went on for another 3 minutes, almost exact, continuing to explain more stuff she would have to do. The most Jessie had up to that point been able to pride herself in accomplishing was a tune-up job she had once did on one of her dad's cars back home in Nashville, where her father ran a mechanic shop, whom had taught Jessie a thing or two. But replacing a bunch of wires and spark plugs didn't involve disassembling and reassembling the car's engine in any way, so now all she could do was add 10W30 conventional every couple of days to keep it from going bone dry and damaging itself, eventually leading to the engine blowing out, at which point no other solution but to junk the old whip. And for the last month, that is all she has had to do to keep up with such dismal attempts at auto maintenance, that and deal with the white smoke which had kept her busybody worried over more driver anxiousness. She knew the white smoke had to be coming from the oil that leaked out of the valve gasket burning up as it dripped onto the exhaust manifold, exactly as what her buddy had said how the smoke was being created. But is it that, or is there further mechanical problems with the car that I'm not aware of Jezebel would encumber herself with? She didn't know and couldn't exactly tell. I really hate this car sometimes, felt Jezebel. But Ubering everywhere she knew would eventually get too expensive, so she had to drive the Camaro whenever necessary. And it really is astounding how Jezebel had already driven a car something over 5,000 miles just driving a car from Tennessee to Southern California. Not all in a straight line from start to finish, but had driven in so many more miles on the way. The car was originally a brother's, but that was before Tom, her brother, had upgraded to a 5th-generation Bumblebee Camaro, and had second-handed the car into her possession, just so she could have an A to B car to get her places. But Jezebel had really grown into the A to B. It now truly was hers, and only hers, and considering everything she had survived through the course of the last year of her 27-year-old life, well, where am I, thinks Jezebel as she changes gears in her head from worrying over one matter into worrying over another, midday or way later. Jezebel couldn't tell at the moment, considering how much driving she had been doing all day, plus dealing with the time-seeking affairs of combating LA traffic. So many hours doing such, and right now she didn't know what time it was, and whether when getting to the shoot, if she'd be late or not. Downtown LA had a certain tainted yellow glow about her, and that was making Jezebel think it was way later than she imagined it was. Wait. And now Jezebel checked her iPhone to see what time it was. It was 1:05 p.m., it said. And there you have it. It wasn't as late as Jezebel feared it would be. She was still making good time trying to reach the shoot, even when it didn't feel like that way. It was just the ugly yellowness the city of LA was shining in, so drab and dingy and hot rusted metal solid, the residues left over from a day dying young, only seeming like it was mere hours before nighttime would clock in and clock out the daytime setting. A song then comes onto the radio, Kiss FM, and it's that one Chainsmokers song called Side Effects. She likes this song. A month ago, she was driving on Wilshire Boulevard around Beverly Hills. The song came on and she had a vision. All of a sudden, everything went 80s cartoon mode, 80s intro cartoon mode, and Jessie was self-glamorized as a 2019's gem. She loved that cartoon. First time she saw it on TV, she was 7 years old and fully remembered it, but years and years later, it became her El Dorado of long lost memories since she didn't remember the name, considering she was 7 years old the last time she saw it. And for years into her teenage years, she tried to look it up and find it. What was the name of that cartoon? What was the name? What was the damn name? But she couldn't remember. But then that terrible remake movie of it came out and it looked familiar. And when she looked up the cartoon on YouTube, bam! Jessie was 7 again and getting the wind tunnel effect of nostalgia overload. A backdraft that totally blew her mind now at 27 as it did at 7. And it was marvelous. Damn, she loved that feeling that vision had graced her with. Felt the yearning to have it again and again and again and again. But life is just too fleeting when it comes to the good stuff like that. Pity. I swear the shoot better not be some gross, beat-up, abandoned fashion district sewing factory like last time, Jezebel thought, unable to stand the idea if it was. Downtown LA in and of itself was a gross place for any form of exhibition. This was the old part of town no new coat of paint could ever freshen up enough. Downtown LA was just that old and broken down and yellow-walled. The walls yellow like the yellow that's accumulated from enough nicotine being blown against the surface until the yellow begins to turn brown. This was Smoke City, tarnished all over with disgusting cement bricking that just made everything seem like an uninhabitable mess, with no amount of reinforced gentrification could ever fix. You could throw as much money against these old town walls as you wanted, none would ever stick. I really need to stop accepting blind gigs from Craigslist, thinks Jezebel, anxious towards what she would find once she found the right spot for the photo shoot. Skid Row. Oh crap, damn, get me out of here. Just turning a corner and Jezebel found herself here, Tent City, here, more homelessness of LA. But there was a horror in these streets you couldn't find anywhere else. There were hundreds and hundreds of them scattered all over the place, like landmines, which Jezebel had to drive out of lanes just to avoid, and sometimes more like naval mines in water. They would then eye her in her Camaro and become magnetically locked on as they start to drift towards her car while pulling the chain and anchor beneath them. And one time Jezebel had to drive onto the pavement just to avoid one seeming to want to jump in front of her Camaro and end himself. After a couple of turns, she was out of the gauntlet and she was here. What is this? Jezebel was now on a street completely void of all life. It was as expected and regretted. A deserted area of downtown LA, a ghost town dab smack in the middle of the largest metropolitan area of the US West Coast. And as for the building she was now sizing up what she needed to enter, it was just a drab reskinning of everything else here around in this abandoned commercial center. An old and rotted building that hadn't seen its heyday since the Ike administration. A site that only some hipster dipshit would marvel at its historical architectural novelty, even when there was never one drafted by the likes of Frank Lloyd Wright from back in the day, and FLW himself would absolutely detest this structure and want to see a wrecking ball demolish it, and would smack the smartphone out of the lumbersexual man's hands who would want to take a selfie with this monstrosity behind him. No amount of outdoor accent light fixtures were ever going to make this ever a money shot scene. Is this it? It can't be it. But what else could it be? This is exactly where the GPS had brought her. And she had already validated the address with the crew she was to work with over text messaging, since she had messed up the address before leaving home and had driven for a half hour in the wrong direction, heading towards San Bernardino before discovering her error. Fine, let's see what we got here. Luckily, there was no parking signs on the street, so Jezebel felt might be able to park at the front of this site, but seeing how no other cars were parked anywhere on the extended street, she feared how her Camaro might then stick out like a sore thumb, and therefore decided to park in a narrow alley behind a dumpster, perfectly out of sight. If she was to get ticketed, so be it. Better to have LAPD discover her vehicle compared to anyone else that might try to break in and steal whatever they can from the inside. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack went her high heels across the pavement. As the sound resonated throughout the alley like SOS Morse code signaling off a deserted island somewhere in the South Pacific. Except for her velvet purple high heels, the only other things she wore today on her legs were her black fishnet stockings. Jezebel, being a dancer, had pretty legs, very long, and she knew how to walk, strut, and dance them. So of course she was to make them her spectacle. And as for the rest of her attire, above her legs, Jezebel wore a short purple fringed skirt, and above that a purple shoulderless blouse, and above that nothing else but her black pearl necklace. Except for maybe her thick eyeshadow, which could be argued is something worn compared to just being applied. Her makeup being so thickly textured, it might as well be constituted as a garment. Standing at about 6 feet, Jessie herself, 5'8", with a pair of 4-inch stiletto heels, she was quite the majestic amethyst vase on top of a lengthy obsidian pedestal. Looking quite pretty in purple, but modest in her 80s sensibilities, that of a John Hughes movie with a soundtrack to Tears for Fears. Might not have been the straight fire, trendy, but Jessie understood fashion was about you and what you brought to the game. Eyeing around, I don't want to be here, Jezebel squeaked. She was way too pretty for a drab place such as this. Like a fair-skinned toddler running naked across a drab cemetery, then coming across a tombstone with no name, just a date. And it was the day of this particular child's birth, and the date of the death is yet to be disclosed. Everywhere Jezebel stepped was a spot she felt as though she superstitiously shouldn't. Now in front of the building, on the sidewalk, she looked up, and the building was at least 4 stories high. And there were no entrances she could spot anywhere. Great. A site with no doors. As if whatever this building was built to house was meant to be kept in and never be let out, nor anything or anyone outside being let in. What they got in here, dragon guarding a mountain of treasure or something? Jessie joked to herself in her thoughts. So, Jessie, what do you know about these cats? She then thought, referring to the people that referred her to come here. Curious to her intuition's notions, but her intuition, since from the get-go, had already absolutely demanded her to heed it as a danger and a forewarning. Yet Miss Singer here had disregarded it. So now, here at the eye of the storm, what else could they say that they hadn't already? Craigslist by no means was the best strategy to snag a gig, but there was just so much naked opportunity present to deny. Jezebel had already caught the drift in this city with modeling or acting or dancing or anything agency's bottom agenda was. There was always being an admissions fee, and figuring the 4 digits and up. That and then wave after wave of gatekeepers she had to entice, by all means necessary, before finding herself here, what Craigslist could offer with just 24% battery-powered text messaging in comparison. Of course, the downside of Craigslist was the Sturgeon's law of deal-making. Although so can be said about the agencies, there was always a 90% chance of hell knows that she would have to sort through before she felt like she was finally finding something genuine, a genuine, full, honest gig. Nothing had to do with some strange guy promising top-drawer networking, considering how nimble Jessie was, considering all of her dancing pros. Just about half the potential gigs Jessie had to sift through kept promising loads of money and high heaven, but would then send her a picture of a naked woman squatting down and doing something disgusting and totally perverted. The catch being, what they wanted was Jessie to send a photo back of herself reenacting the vile scene. Just about 50% of them being just that, 40% of gigs also the same, but not as perverted. Sexual in nature, yes. Naked, yes. Erotic, yes. But this time, softcore perversion, which might eventually lead to her to do topless dancing in a strip joint somewhere in Oxnard or someplace. And as for the final 10% of possibilities for a woman's finding something decent in a city like this, still no guaranteed promises whatsoever. But really just a whole lot of ambiguousness of the nature of the gig she was getting a yes and no feels from. However, Jessie knew ahead of time that that was the best she was going to get, if considering uncertainty being anything to be something certain about. For all she knew, the gig was going to lead her to actually know. Right now, she didn't want to entertain the thought, So now all she needed to do was find a door and find her way in and hope for the best. Fingers crossed. Please tell me I don't have to go back down that creepy alley just to find a way from some back door? Please? She thought, but then she had a prayer answered, one she hadn't yet made, but one felt thankful of. Hey, said a woman like her that just popped up on Jesse's left. Hey, said Jesse, greeting back. Hi, oh my, I love your fishnet stockings, she went. A bit ditzy-like, but still more welcoming than anything else Jesse was finding in this part of town. You're here for the photo shoot, indexed Jezebel, with index finger and all. Yes, yes, and you? Jesse just nodded, but then felt a delayed startlement reaction. Wait, wow. Where did you come up from? Oh, I just got dropped off from a Uber just down that street that way. She then pointed down the street crossing the one they were on and down where Jesse wouldn't have caught the sight of it. Oh, thank you for being here with me. Oh my gosh, this is so sketchy. She then added, then eyed up at the drab building herself and began pouting a bit. She was a pretty blonde, of course, mostly in Abercrombie and Fitch sorts in attire, that or guess, Jezebel guessed, looking like some poster girl girlfriend of some generic surfer dude from Redondo Beach. Pretty, yes, but a little too girly girl for a girl like Jesse's taste. As pretty as Jezebel liked to make herself out, she at least prided over the fact that how meticulous and detail-oriented and smart her fashion choices were made to be. There was a style to what Jezebel wore, not something she'd leave the house with, which she had slept the night before in. Daisy Dukes and a flannel knotted top was just so lazy. All right, enough, Jessie, she then thought as she became aware of how judgmental she was all of a sudden becoming with, what's your name? Excuse me, what's your name? Joy Anderson Stevenson. Oh, with Joy here. Funny girl, though, even did a little curtsy while finishing off saying the Stevenson part in her name, and Jezebel was anything but royalty. Jezebel now eyed Joy with eyes slit, but decided just to be a good girly girl back and like her. Pillar up a feminist agenda before continuing being as harsh. Oh wow, this place is just so sketchy. What are two pretty girls like us doing here? Joy continued with a sense of very minimal intricacy in her sheepish sighs. No mind it could ever have the patience and methodical aspect to sit down and put together a 3,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. And honestly, stop, Jessie thought, trying to undo her initial impression of Joy, considering how it now seemingly didn't want to stop interrupting what was more important to have her thoughts be set on. Joy, your clue is about as good as mine, clicked Jezebel with a click and a wink. Very stylishly and colored old West Side Story-ish. And Joy now liked hearing her say that, seeing how much more personality Jezebel had compared to enough. Listen, what do you know about this shoot? Asked Jessie as she eyed Joy. Joy just shook her head. So you think it's legit, or, we got some creepy dudes to deal with? Yeah, my money is on creepy dudes, answered Joy with a sigh, and then had that look in her eyes, which Jezebel couldn't help but to release a short and minute giggle. But then a door opened up where both girls never saw a door, but it was there now, and out came a 5'6" person with silver emo hair and black as tar simple plain t-shirt and a skinny jeans, and said, "Ladies, do enter," and did that hand-to-body gesture show hospitality and permission for the two to do so and enter, that is. And so the two did, and this person, being a person and not a he or she, was an instantaneous sign for the two to feel relieved that the gig was definitely legit. So into what looked like a merry-go-round clothing store from back before anyone present was even born, a place of never-ending cobwebs where even all the spiders that had made them all had long ago abandoned. Up a flight of stairs where, watch it, some steps might give way, the person noted. Then up another. Yes, I know. Why have a photo shoot in such a sketchy joint like this? But trust me, if it was the other way around and we were at some McMansion above the 101, that's when you know when your concerns would be justified. Illustrated the person, and both girls now knew immediately what the person was referring to. Jezebel herself had already been in one, and on Mulholland Drive even. Never had she been in such a gigantic open-air space with such vast-sizing rooms where the stench of marijuana and sweat didn't permeate. An establishment as immediately as she had found herself heading in, she had found herself wanting to hightail it out. Her first big glaring no-no sign being how all the women there, tons of them, were completely butt naked. So many cowgirls herded together like cattle while the cowboys of the establishment were all tan, tribal, tattooed, and fully clothed. "Oh my gosh, what's your name again?" asked Joy to Jessie. "Jezebel," Jessie answered, thinking how Joy had never asked to begin with, now asking to be reminded. "Oh, that is such a pretty name. Why don't I see more girls with that name?" Joy entertains. "Because it's a name that derives from a biblical whore." Jessie acknowledges to herself but says nothing. Jezebel's parents were non-religious hippies, and that is all that needs to be said about that. "I must add, Jezebel," said the person. "Yes?" asked Jessie. "You look like a particular." Jessie now guessed the person meant she seemed to remind the person of a maybe famous person. And Jessie was sort of used to this, since almost always one name seemed to pop up every other time. "Please don't say Katy Perry. I've heard Katy Perry, and I don't think I look anything like Katy Perry," Jessie forlorned. No, that is just so broad and ghastly inaccurate, might I add. Not to make Katy Perry nor you seem less attractive, but the face is different. Whoever said that has no understanding of facial structure and photogenics and beauty. The person mentioned. Ha! Jessie now found this intriguing. Jessie, being a pretty girl, did have a vanity thing about her, so now she felt like inflating it some by hearing this person out. "I said you look as to be a cross between Isabella Adjani and Frusia Bulk." Jessie had no clue who those two were. Jessie said nothing, but the person then figured more explaining was necessary from Jessie's not doing so. "Your face is all Mademoiselle Adjani, who in her early years I'd say probably was one of the most beautiful French actresses in existence. I love her and Queen Margot. Fantastical film. Fantastic." That really caught Jessie's keen interest. "But your eyes are almost 100% Ferrugia unmistakably. A very beautiful woman, I will say, but I think her movie roles and characters ended up leaving her with much more scarier personality than I would have been fond with." Jessie now understood she definitely needed to Google image those two women up to see the resemblance. "Oh, you know what? I have one more name I will throw in," mentions the person, and now really seems to be looking into Jessie's eyes and straight in through them. Also. And for whatever reason, Jessie now got scared. Now, this name isn't as much based on looks, but maybe in the eyes, though, again. Maybe. But not looks, but definitely feel. Definitely feel. In vibes. "Who?" asked Jessie, knowing this one was definitely going to nail it. "Fiona Apple. From that one music video of hers from the 90s, I'd say. How am I forgetting its name?" And hearing that name, Jessie's eyes blew up. Unlike the other two, Jessie knew damn well who that artist was, damn well, and also knew exactly which music video the person was referring to by name. Jessie kept silent. "Oh, do me next, rejoiced Joy." Which wasn't exactly the best way to word it with Jessie and especially the person here. "Well," went the person with eyes watching her bounce up and down, "I guess a much fairer and slender version of Jane Mansfield, I'd say." Joy seemed ecstatic. And now not, since now Jessie could imagine she had no clue who that was either. But why should Jessie think something of it? Neither did she, nor who a Jenny or Bulk had been, so there was that. And then finally, they reached what now looked like a totally legit photo shoot, and everything that preceded was everything Jezebel was hoping for. No surprises. No stories she'd need to lock up in her closet, which guys like Ray would be concerned with, asking about later. And after it was all said and done, they all exited, and everyone got everyone's number, and they all went home. But before Jessie could, she did Joy a favor and drove her all the way down to Torrance, and then drove all the way back up to North Hollywood, needing to replenish her car with more oil on the way, that is. When she arrived home, it was already nighttime, and now all she had to think about was what possibilities the photo shoot would open up for her. And she was simply glad that was that. This was a good day.